So before I start, who here and where are you from have food shelves on your campus? Does anybody out there have this as part of your college?
No, we've started discussion on it here in Mankato, but we don't have anything up and running yet.
Excellent.
Yep.
Okay. Well, hopefully this is helpful. For full disclosure, too, the campus kitchen itself did not start the food shelf. It was actually started by kind of a committee of mostly staff and faculty that were looking at issues of student poverty. The big thing that they found was textbooks, and they're talking about meal plans, and then the idea of the food shelf came up. And since Campus Kitchen works in food, we were invited kind of into that process. And by the time we got everything done and set up, even though it's still kind of managed and maintained by this larger committee that oversees it, we thought it would be best to kind of brand it as Campus Kitchen, since it kind of fit in well with the rest of our programs, and it definitely fits in better within Campus Kitchen than anything else on campus. And it's also a way, as we're looking and talking to funders about our program, it's a nice story to say that, to share that not only are we doing stuff offsite in the community, but actually addressing student needs on campus. So, yeah, I want to make that clear that we are not the ones that started it, but it fits in really well, and there's a lot that since Campus Kitchens do great work on food management and the operations, and we're going off-site to pick up food from other places anyways, it could fit really well into an operation. So I'm going to go through the main steps that I kind of laid out for what we did or what can maybe happen on a different campus. And then please stop me if you have any questions, or especially Linda or Kaylin, since you've seen what we've done, maybe ask me to clarify anything that if I'm not being totally clear on it, especially since I can't see exactly what you guys are all looking at. So the steps that we outline is to assess need, form a leadership team, secure the space, plan for food procurement, form partnerships, and build service learning off of it, create the schedule, and to actually promote the whole operation. So,
Brian, can you spend 1 second talking about the advantages of having a shelf on campus?
Sure. So when the conversations first started, I wasn't even so sure it was, I don't know, even so necessary, because I thought we just have the food shelf that Campus Kitchen already works with. We already send some of our surplus food there. It's just 4 blocks away. Why couldn't we maybe direct students there? And we've never had, from what we can tell, any students visit the food shelf. So actually bringing it on campus works extremely well because it provides for basic needs in a way that's convenient and accessible for students. Most students don't even go across the neighborhood at all. They're not so comfortable, especially if they're going to sit there in a line for up to an hour and ask for help. We really want to, as a college, that we want our students to be able to study and focus and do well in school. Part of that is making sure they're well nourished, and so it's great to be able to have a drop-in site, especially if we have things like granola bars or maybe some apples or something that they can grab quick and enjoy and be able to do better in classwork. Having it part of Campus Kitchen actually really helps us increase our visibility to all the other things we do, whether it's a farmer's market or garden or the meal program. Everybody found out about this food shelf as well promoted. People are excited about it, and actually brought a lot of attention and awareness to everything else that we do in the community. And it was a really good way for the campus to get engaged into giving. We do a food shelf or like a food collection every year for the food shelf down the street. The one I mentioned that's 4 blocks away, and we get some response, but not so much. And really, when we brought it on campus, there's actually a ton of generosity as people that work at the college wanted to help the students out.
Great.
Let's see here. Anything else to say about that, or anybody else want to share something? Okay, so do you want to, since you're looking at the screen what they are, do you want to facilitate what I should be talking about, Linda? Would that be helpful?
That's fine. So now we're going to go through and talk about those 7 or 8 steps that Brian mentioned, the first of which is assessing the need on your campus.
So a lot of this is started as anecdotally. It was the people that staff support people on campus that are finding out that the students are hungry or they're skipping meals. And we didn't start hearing about this until like 3 or 4 years, or at least staff people weren't talking to each other about this and really have it as a recognized need until really recently. So one of the first steps we did, there was a class that was interested in working with it, and they did a survey. I don't have the results of the survey. I didn't get that in time for this webinar, and it was done separate and prior to me. But it was a way for them to see actually there are, dozens and dozens of students that they identify that would potentially use a food shelf. And with that kind of documentation, we're actually able to get a lot of support and buy-in, whether it was from other people that became committee members to help create it, or it was when we were doing the actual fundraising and food procurement, or going up to facilities, especially finding that space to actually build it into. Any questions about the assessment?
We'll move on to the second step. And if you think of questions about anything we've talked about at any point, feel free to shout them out. Step 2 is forming a leadership team.
And then if anybody's having a hard time understanding my funny Minnesota accent, or if I'm mumbly or going too fast, please stop me too.
Actually, Brian,
sure.
Before we move on, this is Kate from the National Office. I was wondering if you could talk about, and maybe this is just my own perception, but if there was any stigma or challenges associated with even just the first initial idea.
We didn't experience any stigmas or people being averse to it for whatever reason. Everybody from the beginning thought it was a good idea and wanted to make it happen.
That's wonderful.
Do you know what's going on with the process in Mankato? Whoever it was that shared about that before.
This is Denise. It's being sort of inspired through the faith community. There's several churches on campus that have been chatting about it a while, and we've been chatting about it as well, and I've done some pretty basic surveying, but the response wasn't enough. It indicated there was a need. So we're talking about it more and trying to refine our assessment a little bit more to try and see what the breadth of the challenge might be. But it's something that I think one of our faith communities on campus may have gotten a little bit of money from somewhere to start something. So I let them know about this as well. Tammy, you on? I don't think so. But at any rate, so we're just kind of starting to wrap our resources and our ideas around it, and that need piece is, kind of the big one, how big of a need is it? And we just did a little paper and pencil thing last Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week, and the majority of the respondents, I think, really got like 30, but most of those folks said that there was a need. So that's enough so that it makes you want to research it a little more, see if there's more we can be doing.
And that's a really interesting tie-in, using Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. I like that.
Yeah.
And nice to see so much support. And I think I see that you're on the call. Ann Goski from Kent State University. You might not have speaker, but they also are in the process of doing an on-campus food bank for students as well. So I'm curious if she does join us later or is able to speak a little more, she can share some of that. But Brian, I'll let you continue with forming a leadership team.
Great. And also maybe for the language too, when I'm talking, to be clear, because I think what we call it is it's a little bit of a regional thing. Food shelf is the same as food pantry or whatever. Here we call food banks. It's the big warehouses like Second Harvest Heartland or Feeding America now that supply the food for a lot of these different food shelves. So when I say food bank, it means the big centralized place that we get our food from, and then food shelf is the place where our customers or students would visit. So hopefully that makes it a little clearer. So when we came up with the leadership team, a bit of it was natural. It was a couple social work professors, a couple students that were working on student poverty, and then we invited a couple other key people into it that we thought would be useful. One was the director of the dining service, because at first we thought it was going to be maybe a conflict of interest, especially because the work that we do with especially our meal program so vital in having a good relationship with the dining service is that they're comfortable to keep, sending us all their free food. I was a little nervous at first of approaching them and saying that we wanted to get involved in supporting this program that gave students free food when, of course, they'd probably want them to come and frequent their cafe and cafeteria on campus. But actually, when bringing the director into it, he was really excited, saw the need for it right away, didn't see it as any competition, and was wondering how they could help. In the end, they provided kind of a drop-off site that we'll talk a little bit later. At the coffee shop, people could bring their donations. They offered some kind of discount. But I guess the only issue that kind of related to Kate's question, the only stigma or whatever I had was that this was going to, bother our great partners in the dining center. But in the end, they're willing partners with it. A couple other team members that we pulled in is somebody from marketing to help with the promotion so that she was able to see what we were doing the whole time and provide input on making it visible. And then the director of facilities was also invited to meetings and kind of came semi-regularly. So he would know kind of exactly what we're looking at and, posing the questions about legalities and risk and insurance and licensing and all that stuff. And make sure I talk about that later. In the end, we didn't worry a lot about it, but it was good having him part of the conversation. Any other questions about that? So should we move on to secure a space?
Sounds good.
Excellent. So when we were looking for space, we had the idea that students would be at least shy or not want to be seen going into a food shelf. So I think there is a stigma kind of from the user's perspective. It might not be a comfortable process. So we were always looking for, what's a place that's comfortable that somebody can go in without outing themselves as that they're using a food shelf. So in our particular campus, we found a little kitchenette that's used right off of the chapel that was only used basically once a week. It was connected to an area that was, with high traffic, but actually off of it where nobody would even notice or see what somebody was doing when they would go into the back of the chapel, because people go back there quietly anyways. We didn't know what we were going to face with a license. Again, the city doesn't even know that we did this. It's a pretty low-risk operation because we're using non-perishable goods. But just to be kind of safe in the future, we were happy that it had a sink in there because we suspect that it might be a requirement for what we're doing. And if it becomes disclosed later on, we'd have to provide that. So that was nice. And it was nice and kind of compact, but not too crowded. As you can see from the picture, you can fit 7 people in there, and that's about it.
You will get that picture later. It's coming.
Sorry, I'm looking at the picture. This is a problem with technology at the moment. So you get to see a picture later of a space.
You will.
So really, we just got the 2 metal racks with 4 shelves on each, and that was basically able to hold, plenty enough food for probably 200 people at a time, and then we would just kind of restock it as needed.
And actually, the picture that everyone is looking at right now is the pantry at Baylor, and I do believe we have at least 2 ladies from Baylor on the phone. Can you guys speak to how you secured your space and what thought went into that?
This is Abby Reese from Baylor, and we spoke to the department head of the Family Consumer Science Department and found that there was a pantry that was not being used that we were able to put a shelf in and put all our supplies in there.
Great. And you guys can see from the picture versus what Brian described, it looks like it's pretty much the same size. How many students are you guys able to serve from that size shelving unit?
We actually use that for our for the community more than we do the students. So we're able to serve quite a lot, probably about 200 or so.
Great.
So are you using the same kind of inventory of food for the meals that you serve off campus, as well as the giving to students that are coming in to treat it like a food shelf?
Or the community?
Or you mean
sorry, we are only serving the community right now, but we're looking into serving our students as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, and also for clarity too, I don't know if I mentioned, but the committee, when they started the food shelf, they only wanted it for students. And if we were inviting the community members into the space, it logistically would be different. I think we would have maybe a trickier time with, maybe with the recruitment, and definitely from like a facilities space issue, we would have a ton of trouble. I don't know if you would have found a space that would have satisfied providing for the community.
Mm-hmm.
And then, geographically, we're only 4 blocks away from a large and pretty well-stocked food shelf.
Liz at Boston, are you still on the call? Okay, that's fine. We'll see a picture of their shelf later, and it looks very different, and it's a great example of how this can look different based on the needs of your campus. But are there any other questions or comments about securing the space before we move on? All righty, we'll move on to planning for food procurement.
Cool. So from the beginning, when people heard about this, I was actually really surprised at how many people wanted to give. Staff people that normally wouldn't ever give to a food drive were really interested in, bringing bags of groceries. And so from the very beginning, it was kind of clear that we were going to be able to keep it stocked, mostly from, the random donations from the larger campus community. And that's the way it's worked out. So the main piece of procurement is, when you're doing all the promotions, we're promoting it both as a service. So I think most of the posters that were coming out saying this is a place and this is a schedule where students can grab food. And if you want to donate food, please do so. And this is where you can donate it to. And so in the beginning, we had, bins at every single restaurant space. And there's 3 of them on campus, and then another one in the Welcome Center, and then one at the adjacent office, the closest office to the actual food shelf. In the end, it was a lot to manage. Most of them weren't even being really used, especially the one at like the cafe. People were barely using, and people didn't know what to do with it. And then we were having to coordinate, students to go around and pick up the food. So come in the fall, we're just going to keep it at the welcome desk. So at the student center, where most people are walking through every day, that's also near the mailroom and stuff. That will be the place where we drop it off. And so by creating, just really making sure that the promotions are asking for donations all the time and having an easy place for people to drop food off, takes care of 90% of our food procurement without that much trouble. The one other thing that we were able to leverage with the campus kitchen program, because for our meals, probably 90% of our meals are the food that's already prepared from the dining center, but that last 10% we go to a food bank. Second Harvest or Feeding America, to pick up, some raw ingredients or vegetables or something. So when we were going there weekly to grab stuff, we would just kind of see what is our food shelf missing. Particularly, it was like granola bars and mac and cheese and stuff like that. That was going the quickest. So we would try to grab, large cases or whatever was available to pick up from the food bank. And so between those 2 sources, that was plenty of food to work with, and that it kind of it equalized really well. The pace of food coming in from these donations from the campus communities, mostly people that work there, equalized the amount of food that people were picking up. Does that make sense, or any questions?
That's a great diversity of food and just having a lot of those different resources. I also wanted to direct everyone's attention to the picture that you will see right now is actually from the pantry at Lee University. And I guess here's another one of those educational opportunities of the different ways we refer to things. The same way Brian says food shelf, I say food pantry. So probably, and I think Linda is also the same, and so a lot of how we refer to it is a food pantry, but it means the same thing. But here's Lee's, and I don't think they're on the call right now. But some of you, if you came to the conference this past year at Lee University, we actually got a tour of their pantry, which is under the Leonard Center where the campus kitchen operates out of. And it's similar in the sense that they have a really robust partnership in the community and on campus. So it's not necessarily fully associated with the campus kitchen, but it does have some connections. And then the students are actually the volunteers that staff it, are a lot of the times the same ones that come for donations as well to pick up food.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
Yeah, also, most of our students that run it are the most regular users as well.
So it's nice to build that sense of community and that, you know, a little more comfort level, or at least that's the way I kind of feel about it.
Yeah, it's definitely a level of comfort when students are using it. You know, they're not meeting a student in privilege that's, being good and helping them in trouble. It's actually people that know, can tell them the recipes about, the funky things that there's, what is it, pureed pumpkin, something that we might have a lot of. They have ideas of how they've taken that and worked with it at home to make something interesting out of it.
Or our most recent donation that we've had conversations about, kohlrabi or other random vegetables and things.
Cool. Yeah, we don't have vegetables, also because we don't have a license. And personally, I'm comfortable, but I know there's some hesitation on offering perishable goods. So are you looking at the picture with the nice produce rack?
Yes. At least.
Great. That's a great picture. Cool.
Yep. Alrighty, let's move on to forming partnerships. And here's another picture at Lee. And one of the partnerships that they obviously have is with a local grocery store. That's how they get a lot of the supplies for their pantry. But anyway, go ahead, Brian.
So I talked about a couple partnerships with the food service that was offering discounts. But when it comes to service learning opportunities, I think this is such a great program for that. Particularly, we work with, as a campus kitchen, you work with all sorts of classes. Lots of times it might be the religion class or social work class that uses it, where they require students to go out a few times into the community. But we have a lot of classes that come in kind of project management classes, where they're charged with creating something, an event or something that doesn't exist. Instead of just assisting, they need to do something new. And so that's a lot of times it's tough to get these groups of students kind of on the same page and understanding the program in enough time where they can actually provide something that's meaningful and not just us supporting them in their, in just a class project in a grade, that they're leaving something useful. And so the food shelf is, a relatively simple operation that's kind of easy to understand. It's well connected to campus life. And so we're able to do a couple of things. One, is a survey that was done. We just went through, well, in the promotion part, we can show a little bit about this art keystone class used it, and all the students were charged with creating some art piece or poster or some promotional material that was used, and that's what we'll be using next year, especially the logo, and they created kind of all the identity for it. And come next year, I know that we'll be working with the class to do a big food drive. You can always give the students, a food drive to work and facilitate that on campus. And I'm really excited to have that be an option that we can offer students to use for their class project.
Yeah, especially
any questions or
service learning is really big. It's nice to have another avenue for them to work. And like you said, this can involve art classes for the logo, which we'll see in a minute. Any sort of class that has to do research, which could be like a mathematics or statistics class or like a communications class, or any, to do that sort of initial assessment. There's a lot of different opportunities to get other students involved, which then might help with your publicity and student buy-in once the pantry is going. Anyone else have questions, comments?
Or ideas or suggestions and things that you've done in your campus or seen happen related to the food shelf? Okay.
All right, so the slide you're looking at now, this is kind of what Brian was talking about with service learning, and you can see the logo. That's what the art class created. And I only picked one because they actually created the same logo in a bunch of different colors, but I think the green is what you guys are primarily using, right, Brian?
Yeah, I think that's the one that we will use. We haven't used anything yet, but
okay,
I
yeah.
like it.
But yeah, I think this is a really cool logo. It's really simple, but sort of shows the message and the meaning behind the pantry.
And we stole the name itself from another community school in the metro that used the campus cupboard. We tried to create something unique, so we didn't steal their name for it. But in the end, we really liked the name, and anybody else here is welcome to steal that logo or steal the name for if you were to do something similar on campus.
Well, that's quite the offer. All right, so next we're talking about making a schedule for staffing the pantry, and now everyone can see what the pantry and space at Augsburg looks like.
Cool, thank you for that. Thank you for explaining what they're looking at. And I'm looking at that. So that was the student leadership team. So the students that you're seeing, most of them were, users of the food shelf, and the ones that were running it. So in the beginning, we had about 5 students that were meeting regularly to kind of help set it up, and they were the ones that staffed it. And we tried to find a schedule. Well, mostly we're building it off of their schedule because we're starting it from scratch. We didn't have an idea of what worked well. We just knew that these students were committed, so we kind of worked with what they had available and what they thought would be good. And then we just made sure that we had a diversity. So, on a Tuesday it was a morning, Wednesday it was the afternoon, Thursday it was an evening. So I think we started with about 4 times. We quickly found out that nobody came in the very late night one. That was kind of hard to staff anyway, so we cut that out. And we tried to add another afternoon one. So we improvised a little bit. If I was to do it again, I think we'd probably do a little more research on the front end to make sure that we kind of had a good time. Do that as part of the surveying, finding out when the good times for people to visit would be, because it did kind of mess up with promotions and kind of having clear schedules set out, given that we did change it halfway through the semester. I should only say we've only been open 1 semester, so this is pretty new for us, and we're learning as we go. And so we made sure that we had 2 students staffing it at all times. Because it was a little bit off the trail, some people had ideas of security, of not wanting to leave 1 student in the back by themselves in a space that wasn't totally visible by everybody. But the biggest deal of having 2 people, I think, the realistic thing is that, people often get sick or run into exams or something else, and so at least having 2 people there, if one person needed to step out, there was somebody there to cover it. And as the coordinator, that's the only one that was really getting paid to kind of support the food shelf. I just try to make it keep those times in my own schedule if I needed to drop in and help with anything. And it was also good for me just to be there regularly, kind of myself, and see how the food shelf was operating, who was coming, what wasn't working well, so I can be more supportive of the students that were in charge of it. Any questions about that or ideas? The colleges that kind of set the schedule, anything that you can share with me or others to do something better?
Everyone's so quiet today. I know there's a few on there that have similar ideas or are starting things, but
I have a question.
Go for it.
How do you determine, or like just any student that walks in gets a certain amount of food, or how do you determine who's eligible, or is there any eligibility, or how much to give out, that kind of stuff?
That's a great question. I can't believe I didn't even think to cover that in here. How we set it up. We copied the model that the other Metro food shelves, campus food shelves had. So we looked at 2 other ones and they had been in operation for a year or 2. So I figured they worked out a lot of the kinks. So we just kind of stole their name and we stole their rules. And so that was that students can grab up to 5 items any day, and they can come in as many times as they want. And it was interesting because there is this stigma or myth that if things are too generous, that people will abuse the system. And what we found out through our tracking, actually, people weren't coming in. There's some people that were kind of regularly, once a week, but nobody was really coming in every day and taking as much as they could. Some people were coming in and even just grabbing like 3 items that they needed at the time, a few items, or every other week or so. So we were able to see that, even if we're allowing them to come in every day, they weren't taking advantage of that and then putting maybe too much of a burden on our food inventory right away.
And just any student that came in?
Yep, any student, so we don't ask them, income or if they're work study eligible or anything like that. If a student comes in, we'll give them up to 5 a day.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
We're a private college, but we're also we're also often called Augsburg Tech. It's the diversity of the students and kind of the access. It's similar to a community college. We're pulling in a lot of students with high financial needs and first generation students. So we do have a lot of need where we're at, and even if we wanted to put some kind of measurement of who should be able to use it and who couldn't, I don't know how we would enforce it or how we would set it that wouldn't scare everybody away with our bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Thanks so much for that, by the way. That's great to cover.
Yeah, and I think definitely doing that initial survey just to see if there is a need and kind of figuring that out at each university or college is helpful. But I kind of agree with you, Brian. I've done similar programs in the past, and it's very hard to separate out, and so you might as well just have it as an open resource.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, that I felt even better about that at the end of the semester when we looked at who was using it and stuff, and we knew the students. The students were often friends of the students running it, and they knew for a fact that these students were in need. Like we didn't see anybody that that looked like they were abusing what we were offering.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or ideas or thoughts?
All right.
So
on to our last step, promotion, and then we can sort of wrap it up from there.
Mm-hmm. So what are we looking? Is there any visuals?
Your business card.
The business card.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So probably the biggest way we promote it was this business card. This card that was easy. All the students and staff and faculty that were involved carried these cards around. We had at the welcome desk, all the posters that we had on campus would have a little envelope with these cards in it. So it was a really great way of getting the information out there and having it in a way that they could carry easily in their wallet to refer to. Again, one of the biggest problem is that we changed the times halfway through, and so people weren't, even people that were using it kind of came in a little unsure about the new schedule. So yeah, we got the newspaper article on the TV screens across campus. The art opening, our class that did it, that was a big promotional piece. We tied this, again, it worked really well to brand it with the campus kitchen because we were able to now promote it to all the people that were tied in either on Facebook or email. And do you have the picture of the poster?
I don't, but it's in the toolkit, so
Okay.
you all check it out there.
Great. So so with Campus Kitchen, we also, the poster that we hung up this semester, the one poster is broken down into free meals, free groceries, free cooking classes. So free meals, talking about, on this one poster, we would share everything that we were doing that could be a service to students in need. So it was the meals that were going off-site. It was a free groceries through to the food shelf, and then we do a cooking class every week to students that drop in the evening. We go in the kitchen and we cook extra meals. So instead of calling our food prep night, we call it cooking class to try to promote and get more students engaged into it because it's more of an educational thing. What else as far as promotion?
You had the highlights that you talked about, but sorry, was someone going to say something?
Yeah, could you elaborate more on the cooking classes that you did? I was just curious to see, I guess, what the motivation for that was, and if it's helped and if it's been beneficial for Campus Kitchen.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, it's beneficial just in the basic sense that we always kind of had a cooking class because, years ago when it first started, we were using all the food from the cafeteria, and then we had a bunch of extra vegetables from some funny donation, and we'd use it to cook a meal with to serve, to kind of go beyond the meals that were already prepared. And so 2 years ago, we just started calling it a cooking class. And so we're getting the donated stuff, but we're also, we found a little budget to buy ingredients. We had somebody that really knew how to cook well or good enough that they could teach a class. And so we offered that every week from 7 to 9 o'clock, that students would come up to the kitchen. We would cook together. And then that food that we produced would go to offsite, whether to the homeless shelter, community center, or wherever else. We started doing it this way very regularly when we started doing meals that were reimbursed through the USDA. And so there's very specific requirements about the kinds of meals that we serve off-site to youth. And so we kind of needed to take more responsibility to fill in any gaps that we weren't getting covered from the donations from the dining center. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So calling it a cooking shift is just a cooking class is a little bit just a different way of framing a shift.
Right? Yeah, and so we're doing our best to promote it to students in need. So the students using the food shelf, or students that were coming in through the TRIO program, for example, to try to get them into the program. And then we'd also send everybody home with a meal. So we would end eating what we cooked, or putting a meal in a to-go container so they could take it home with them.
Great.
And so
that's also a really good way to identify students that potentially may not want to go straight to a food shelf or a food pantry, but they're getting a meal from a cooking class like this, as well as just an opportunity to build community. And I like that you kind of pointed out that it doesn't necessarily have to be a gourmet chef that's leading the class, but just someone who feels that they have knowledge that they can contribute for others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had kind of on both ends. One, we had a gourmet chef that was a student that he had a project management class, and this was his project that he worked on. And so he was doing stuff that I've never heard of, and really, fancy meals, which is really cool and beneficial. Part of me thinks is that maybe it's a little, almost seemed like unapproachable for the students that were in the class. They didn't know how to their kitchen cupboard is not stocked with all the spices that we just use in the kitchen. So I don't know. I mean, it was great and really pushed boundaries, but I don't know how much they took from it. I kind of like the approach that we have, really just basic, salt, pepper, vegetables, some oil and butter, and maybe some meat. Just really making it, simple. So it's like enchilada bakes or lasagnas, and really creating some really cool, simple, and affordable meals with people that barely know how to cook.
And you said that the resources and the ingredients that you got for these cooking classes, they were just leftovers. And what kind of budget and where did you get the money for the extra things?
We have a little bit of the budget because the meals that we serve off-site, we get reimbursed for.
Mm-hmm.
So every meal that we serve to a kid at the local community center, we get $3 through the USDA after fulfilling a bunch of bureaucratic pieces. We get reimbursed for that. And so we did have some money to make sure that we covered all of the requirements. It's a big piece of it. I'm actually looking at, for next year, I kind of want to work with Meals on Wheels and becoming kind of one of their vendors, their catering vendors, and have them pay for the meals that we create. So that way we can really go beyond and maybe do 2 cooking classes a week, because they could pay for all of our meals. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So we would have an order of 25 meals a day, and we buy all the ingredients, and we'd actually make a little bit of money on that, plus having all the fresh ingredients to actually build a cooking class off of.
And then 2 other ways you can also provide for it is, one, through our online giving campaign that we use with CKP. So any of that money that you raise there can go directly to support your programmatic operations, and also specifically talking about this program if it's something new you want to start. And also potentially there are mini grants out there to do this kind of stuff. We're working on it here at CKP, seeing if we can bring anything out around there. But there's definitely interest in a lot of these areas. So, and I know Brian has kind of run the gamut of doing a lot of the different ones. So, but
the student government money was a big thing too for the cooking classes.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
So at this point, I'll point out that the toolkit I emailed, Slashes in the Pantry, the online pantry, has a resource from the Oregon Food Bank that is called So You Want to Start a Campus Food Pantry. So we think that Brian did a really great comprehensive job, but if you want to look at another perspective, there is that available to you. Brian's email address is also on that if you want to email him in the future, or you can email me and I would get it to him. At this point, I would like Brian to say just a couple of words about the toolkit he also created on farmers markets, and then we'll take any final questions, comments, and go from there.
Great. Does anybody out there have a farmers market on their campus, and what does it look like? So I'm not the only one talking about this, or maybe we can make it go quickly.
We do participate in 2 farmers markets in our local community. They're not on our campus, but adjacent to the community. And through them, we've been able to develop relationships with growers, and they contribute. They make our presence at the farmers market possible each Thursday and Saturday by donating food that we prepare, and then we do a nutritional lesson with that. And then we also gather crops from those local growers that we use all year round.
And what school is this?
It's Kent State.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I knew you were on the call, Ann.
Yeah.
Cool. So our campus farmers market kind of started with a community farmers market. So also, market offsite. So the place that I mentioned before, the youth programs and the food shelf that we work with, that's 4 blocks away. It's all out of this neighborhood community center. And so even years before I started working at Augsburg College, I was part of setting up this little mini farmers market where we found 3 farmers to show up for 2 hours in the afternoon at this community center. And these were farmers that were already selling at the large municipal market. We went up to them, or we went up to dozens of farmers, leading up to the market. Do you want to stick around the city for a couple more hours? We'll give you a whole nother market to sell at. So the big market shut down at 1 o'clock, and so we opened up the little market at the community center from 2 to 4 o'clock. And the farmers were able to break down, set back up, and then make another $100, $200 in a short period before they would go back to their farms. So that was running for a few years, relatively smoothly. And when we kind of were looking at the farmers market on campus, if we should offer one, really when we were doing surveys and finding out how many people on campus would be interested, we kind of found that the scale would be best and kind of most appropriate, very similar to this other market. So we really just made 2 markets, or 1 market into 2 different sites. It's the same 3 farmers with a campus kitchen intern that sits out there and works the EBP machine and kind of answers questions, sells a few other items that the farmers aren't covering, like olive oil and honey and things. Really, we set up every noon hour on Tuesdays in the middle of campus, and then after a couple hours selling on campus, we all hike over to the community center and serve mainly to that particular neighborhood. There's a lot of Somali immigrants, and so mostly the Somali mothers that live adjacent to the community center. So really, it's running 2 farmers markets that touches 2 very different communities, but it's basically as much energy and effort just to manage one, because it's all the same vendors. Is there any questions about that, or anything that you want me to talk about, Linda, or Kate, instead of kind of going over the whole overview, which I'm happy to do or stay longer if people want to do that, but I don't want to ramble about something that people might not be interested about, especially after hanging out on the phone for an hour already.
So does anyone have questions for Brian? Really about anything at this point. Let's open the floor up so that if you need to go, you can get your question answered.
I guess this is Courtney from St. Lawrence University. I had a question about, I guess because I feel like we're pretty small schools too, how do your meal plans work at your schools? Like, you are required to be on a meal plan at St. Lawrence, so I wouldn't know, I guess, of the need or how to go about looking for the need. Is it like that everywhere?
At Augsburg, it's about maybe half the students live on campus, and half of those live in housing that requires them to have a meal plan. So most students on campus do not have meal plans.
Wow, okay.
That's interesting. I would say, though, that, I mean, meal plans all work differently, so maybe I'm totally off here, but even if all of your students are required to have a meal plan, don't discount that there might be the need, because they may have picked the smallest meal plan for affordability's sake, because we know that those are not exactly the cheapest thing, part of being a college student, and perhaps still have a need for other meals that are not provided by that plan that they might not otherwise be able to cover themselves. So that's really where the assessment comes in. And if if you're interested in this and you assess and you see that there is no need, well, there's no need, but there still might be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And again, I mean,
Go ahead.
We find that many of the students who are on food plans still are in need, particularly when it gets to the last 3 or 4 weeks in the semester. They've run out of the monies on the plan, and then find themselves pretty hungry the last month.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
And for the most popular item that we were moving were the snack granola bars or health bars, and so for the students that were running in between 3 classes, so they didn't have time to eat, and they couldn't afford the bagel or the expensive food at the cafe, that they were using that from the food shelf.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Well, if there's no more questions, this is Kate from the National Office again. I wanted to say just kind of a general closing information is that this conversation or this call shouldn't stop here. We're trying to do this more and more, where we're sharing ideas across the network, because Brian's been doing amazing things out in Augsburg forever, and now we're just kind of trying to share it out with everybody else. And same thing with a lot of our schools. I know all these cool things that you guys are doing, but you all don't each know what each other are doing. So I want to continue that conversation, whether it's through these webinars or through an online community or individually connecting people, whatever works best. So feedback is always great, always helpful, different ideas. Approach any of us, and we'll be happy to help you out with whatever you want to do. So I'm just excited about all of these things. And it's kind of, even like the on-campus food pantry or food shelf was something that hit us as like, oh, there's like 5 in the network or 6 in the network that are already doing this, and we just never made that connection until recently. So I want to keep the conversation going on a lot.
Absolutely. All right. So if anyone has anything they'd like to talk to Brian about, I'll be on the line for a couple more minutes, and I'll keep this open just in case. But otherwise, thank you all for being here, and thank you so much to Brian for writing up those awesome toolkits. You absolutely need to look at them if you haven't yet. They're pretty comprehensive, and they have some really great ideas. So thank you for all of your effort in writing that and for presenting today and just sharing some of the good work that you have been doing out in Augsburg.
Thanks, Brian.
All righty. Talk to you guys next month. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Brian.
Thanks, everyone.